we're going to be looking at a scenario where the Middle East has a battle royale. Now, the Middle East consists of very many countries, and it is often regarded as a controversial region because of the very many conflicts that take place here. Now, we will be stretching the definition of the Middle East a little bit because I do want to have as many countries in this battle royale as possible, so we will be including the Caucasus, we'll be including Egypt, as well as Afghanistan and Turkmenistan, even though some of those countries aren't often included in the Middle East region definition. Anyway, if you guys do enjoy today's video, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. As always, all the support is greatly appreciated. If you want to show even further support, make sure to check out our channel membership program. But with all that being said, let's go ahead and jump straight into this video. Now, like I was just saying, the definition of the Middle East is kind of varied. Like Turkmenistan, for example, usually is more grouped in with Central Asia than it is with the Middle East region. But yeah, we're going to stretch the definition just a little bit so we can have as many countries as possible to make this scenario as interesting as possible. Anyway, though, let's go ahead and make our first team in the Battle Royale. And this will be a team led by Turkey that will simply include the Caucasus Mountain countries, so Turkey, Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. Now, I did do a video on the European Battle Royale, and I just want to say that in comparison to that, these teams are going to be a lot smaller because there are far less countries. But with that being said, let's move on to our next team, which will consist of Iran, Afghanistan, as well as Turkmenistan. These are kind of like the fringe Middle Eastern countries, minus Iran, of course, but Turkmenistan and Afghanistan, more Central Asian than Middle Eastern, but still included in this video. So far we have two pretty powerful teams. You know, Turkey is a top 10 military power, and Iran is, I think, top 25. So these teams are relatively strong. It's just that the rest of the teams may not be as strong. We'll see. Next up, though, we have probably the most interesting team ever formed, Egypt and Cyprus. And that's it. Like I said, these teams are going to be relatively small, but do remember that it's important that we try to balance these teams so they're as equal as possible. Right now, the red team is probably the strongest team just because of Turkey, so we could make some changes. You know, maybe we'll throw Azerbaijan onto Iran's side, but Egypt is also a very strong military power, and the closest country to them is Israel, which is also a very strong military power. So if we added them to Egypt's team, that would be way far unfair for the other teams. So yeah, from now on, I'm just going to stop yapping. Let's fill out the rest of the teams. Saudi Arabia will have a team that consists of them, Yemen, and Oman. We're also going to give them the UAE, and then we also kind of have to, by default, give them Qatar and Bahrain. So this is definitely like the biggest team in terms of number of countries, but definitely not the strongest. You know, Saudi Arabia is going to carry this team. The rest of these countries don't really have the strongest of militaries to really, you know, go up against these other teams so far. But now we can go ahead and fill in our final team, which will consist of Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, Iraq, and Kuwait. Now for the balancing changes. I think we're going to give the blue team another country, so we're going to throw them Azerbaijan. We're also going to throw the yellow team Cyprus, which does make Egypt by itself on its own team, but, you know, they're strong. They could probably handle it. But now these sides are relatively balanced. There is one team that is not in a very good spot, but that's just because of their geography. The rest of the teams, though, I do believe they are fairly balanced. Iran, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia, you know, they're all kind of close. Turkey, once again, top 10 power, though. But added in with all these other countries, there's a chance that they could reach and catch up to Turkey, especially if they have one less teammate in Azerbaijan. Egypt, though, Egypt's going to be interesting. You know, they're a one-man show. Egypt, warriors. We all love Egypt. God bless Egypt. With that being said, there's no guarantee they'll win this scenario. Now, let me go ahead and explain the rules if you don't know them. Rule number one is that there has to be one team remaining by the end of this video. It doesn't matter how we get there as long as there is one team left. Rule number two, there's no other rules. That means that teams can work together, like the blue team and the red team may work together to take out the yellow team. There's no bounds for how many allies you can have or how many enemies you can have as long as there is one team left. So that's going to mean there's going to be a lot of alliances, a lot of betrayal, and, you know, definitely a lot of war. But with all that being said, let's go ahead and jump straight into the war. And right off the bat, we have a temporary alliance being made between Egypt and Saudi Arabia to take on the yellow team. Now, all of the countries here, or more so all of the teams here, do view the yellow team as the weakest link in this regional battle royale, and that is because they really truly lack one strong country that is enough to carry the whole region. I don't need to explain which, you know, countries can carry their regions, but the yellow team doesn't really have that. So Egypt will work with Saudi Arabia to start a full-scale invasion of all of these countries. With Egyptian troops crossing the border over into southern Israel, they take over the Gaza Strip of Palestine, while Saudi troops move up and capture the capital city of Kuwait, almost instantly forcing this country into an early surrender. At the same time, Saudi troops will move up north from their country and into Iraqi territory with the goal of heading straight through the Tigris and Euphrates rivers to reach the city city of Baghdad. While over here in the western region, we have them also working with Egyptian forces to take over the southern region of Jordan, now moving up towards their capital city as well. Now, the yellow team does have Israel, which is their strongest country here, and Israel would be able to push back Egypt. They did fight a war against each other in like the 60s, and Israel did win that war. But that was 60 years ago. Things have changed. Now, Israel does have nukes, but we won't be using nukes in this scenario because that's not fair at all. Israel is the only country in the Middle East that has nuclear bombs, and, by default, they'd be able to win, and no one wants that to happen, right? I think we're good. So, Israel's nuclear stockpile magically vanishes overnight. Romania probably stole them, but it doesn't really matter because, once again, the yellow team is the weakest link in the region. They are really unable to properly defend themselves with a large enough military, and that's why we see Saudi troops approach the city of Baghdad. Meanwhile, over here, we see Egyptian troops capture the city of Tel Aviv, and shortly after, they'll go ahead and capture Jerusalem, knocking Palestine out of the war and forcing Israel into a surrender. But we do see Jordanian troops cross the border and liberate large portions of Palestine, pushing back that Egyptian military for now. At the same time, the Jordanian military, working with their allies, is able to push back Saudi Arabia a considerable amount, which will save their capital city for now. But Saudi Arabia is primarily focusing over here on Baghdad, where a very large conflict is unfolding. Eventually, after enough troops are brought up to help out, the Saudis will be successful in taking over the city of Baghdad, which is Iraq's capital city, and arguably the most important city in this region right now. A large amount of morale will be lost for not only Iraq, but for their teammates as well, which will lead to the Saudi Arabians kind of pushing through those front lines and going deeper into Iraqi territory. Eventually, Egypt will also break through over here as Jordan begins to fall. Their capital city will be captured by Egyptian forces, and Egypt begins to rapidly spread out into the area. Really, they were being slowed down by this little military zone right here, but now that that has fallen, Egypt has a highway pass to go in and do what they need to do. They'll go ahead and go up and capture Beirut from Lebanon, which will force them into a surrender before very quickly capturing Damascus from Syria. They will not surrender, however, this will severely weaken them. And at this point, the Saudis will send a large portion of their military forces in to capture the rest of Jordan, while also coordinating with their already existing front line to do an encirclement of this area down here. Not that it is super important or anything, these guys have pretty much already won the war, but still there are two major cities left to capture, one being all the way up here in north of Syria, which they will go ahead and grab, and the other is in Cyprus. But Turkish forces will do us a favor as they go ahead and take Cyprus, and yes, that does mean that the red team has just joined this war in the jumping of the yellow team. So quickly, red team forces will cross the border. Now, they are not at war with the purple or green teams, they are simply just getting in on the free land fest. So Turkish forces move down, they go into northern Iraq as well, and at this point Egypt and Saudi Arabia need to expedite themselves in order to get as much land here as possible, because Turkey's army will likely move a lot faster than theirs. They just joined the war, they're not exhausted or anything, so time really is of the essence here as Turkey moves down even further. We do see Saudi Arabia claim control over this entire area down here, and we also see their forces move up a little bit more before they ultimately make the decision to stop as they reach over to the Syrian border. This will leave Turkey to go ahead and capture the rest of the area, while Egypt will continue their conquest, moving up into the south of Syria until they too eventually stop, which will allow for Turkey to take the rest of this land. So just like that, the first region in the Battle Royale has fallen. The purple and green teams teamed up to take on the yellow team. They were very successful in doing that, and of course, we saw the Turks and the rest of the red team third party at the end of the war. They are going to get themselves Cyprus and a little bit of land out of northern Turkey and Iraq. That's not Turkey, that's Syria. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at this peace treaty. And in this treaty here, we see quite a few changes take place to our Middle Eastern map. First of all, we have Turkey annexing all of northern Syria and Iraq, as well as making Cyprus a member of their team. And I guess I should go ahead and also explain the rules. They're exactly the same as the European video, but when a country or a region or a team is able to defeat another team, they're able to do whatever they want with the land. So they can force countries to come over to their side, they can annex land, which we see down there with Palestine. Well, the only rule in that regard is that there has to be the complete dismemberment of the team that was defeated. So in this case, the yellow team no longer exists. All of its land was divided up by the victors. But as for the rest of the region, we come down to the purple team here. We see that Egypt has gone ahead and combined Israel and Palestine and all of Western Jordan into one country that is simply just Palestine. And up north, they've also combined Lebanon and the remnants of Syria into one country, which is also kind of just Syria. So Egypt will actually go ahead and pick up 2 new members in their alliance. Remember, they were all alone to start, but now they have 2 allies and one that is relatively powerful right here in Palestine. Then now coming over to the green team, who also expanded, they pick up a new member in Kuwait. We also see Saudi Arabia go ahead and annex the rest of Jordan. And then we see the remnants of Iraq go ahead and join up on the green team. So the green team now is looking relatively powerful, actually. Saudi Arabia now has another member that has a fairly competent military in Iraq. But do remember that this region is kind of devastated from the very large war that was just fought. So these guys, of course, aren't going to be full power. But now we are down to 4 teams that remain, and the next move is on the horizon. And that is because the strongest country in this battle royale is getting jumped. That's right, there's no lollygagging, there's no messing around. The 3 other alliances, so the purple team, the green team, and the blue team, are all going to sign another temporary alliance that is aimed at destroying the red team. This did not happen in the European Battle Royale video. Turkey saw that video. They thought they might have a little bit of plot armor, but no. Turkey will be jumped by the entire rest of the Middle Eastern region. And Turkey now probably realizes that, their satellite images were correct in saying that Egypt and Saudi Arabia's militaries never left their border. After they finished off the yellow team, they just kind of stuck around. And they thought, maybe that's just for protection's sake. Maybe they're scared of us, but no, they're invading you. They even brought a new friend in Iran and their allies, who will go ahead and move into Armenia and capture their capital city, forcing that country into surrender before also going up and capturing the capital city of Georgia. So that's not looking too good. Turkey probably wishes they had a few more teammates. Well, actually they do. They have a new one in Cyprus, which they don't even like you, so that's probably tough. I do want to say that relations do not matter in this video, if that isn't obvious enough. But back over to the front line down here, Egypt's forces are finally going to meet their match, as Turkey's forces are going to simply outnumber and outpower them as they're pushed back nearly all the way to their border. But we do finally see Saudi troops get involved in this war as they move up from Iraq and start heading straight into actual Turkish territory. The Iranians are really only focusing on the Caucasus right now because there is a large mountain range here that is very hard to, get across. So most of the fighting at first is going to be between the purple and green team and the red team. We'll go ahead and recapture this city up here and then move up into Turkish territory once more. But as we saw earlier, the Turks are simply more powerful, and they will be able to push back for now as they go ahead and push Egypt all the way back to their border over here in Syria, and Saudi Arabia all the way back to their border with Iraq. Now, obviously, they're not able to expel them completely, which goes ahead and signals that, Turkey is on the losing side here, especially as their allies continue to lose ground over here, with Georgia going ahead and surrendering over to Iran and their allies. From here, Iranian troops will finally cross over into Turkish territory, now focusing on the northeast of this country and making a very impressive front line. Turkey at this point is fighting a 2-front war, technically a 3-front war if you're counting this right here, but this is technically 1 front line. But now we go ahead and see Greece join this war, entering the Battle Royale and registering themselves as a Middle Eastern country, and that would be extremely funny, but they're definitely not Middle Eastern at all, so sorry Greece, you can't participate. But back down to this front line here, we see that Turkish forces are finally being overwhelmed by the sheer number of troops they're up against. The combined military of the entire Middle East versus Turkey, I think we all know how that would go. Now this isn't to discredit Turkey or anything, they would be able to push back like we see over here in the northeast, as well as especially against Egypt down here. But this would eventually turn into an attritional warfare, one that Turkey would not be able to win at all. And with the green team breaking through, the blue team is able to go ahead and enhance their front line even further, now making kind of like a wall that pushes across all of eastern Turkey, before then starting to go across the northern Turkish coast, heading straight towards Ankara. Down south, the Egyptians will go ahead and encircle this city in southern Turkey, which will entrap around 50,000 troops, all of which will be forced to surrender or perish. They're allowed to choose, Egypt isn't barbarian. But with the loss of those troops down there, the southern front in Turkey will somewhat collapse, which will allow for the green team to push even further into Turkey, now going right in between these 2 front lines and into central Turkey. Now at this point, there is a little bit of animosity forming between the 3 sides down here, because remember, this is only a temporary alliance, and also remember, rule 1 of the Battle Royale, there has to be 1 team remaining by the end of this video. So while they're friendly now, they all know that they're going to have to be unfriendly later, and that might make some interesting decisions occur over here. Like the blue team moving down and trying to cut off the green team from further expansion, which will eventually signal down to the Egyptians, and they'll choose to do the same thing. So the green team gets completely cut off from this war, and they're only left with these spoils of Turkey. From here, it's going to be a race between Iran and Egypt to reach Ankara. But also, notably, without the Saudi Arabians in this war, it will leave the Turks to have a somewhat advantage in pushing back, only temporarily though, as less troops on the front line does give Turkey the defensive advantage, as they're able to push all the way back to Saudi Arabia's front line, which, Well, that wasn't a good idea, Turkey. Because now, once again, they'll have to fight against all three teams, and, yeah, that wasn't a good idea, Turkey. So, all three teams will now race across Turkey, heading straight towards Ankara. We do eventually see that the blue team and the purple team will cut off Saudi Arabia once more, but luckily for Saudi Arabia, they were able to pick up a lot more land over here in central Turkey, which will give them a lot more land in the peace treaty. Down south, we do see the Egyptians make a quick landing in Cyprus, taking out the entire island, while up north, the Iranians will gain the edge over the Egyptians, now going straight towards Ankara and reaching the city. From there, a very large battle will start, while the Egyptians will still focus on the south, taking advantage of a kind of distracted Iran and picking up a lot more land from Turkey. They will eventually come around and reach the other side of Ankara, which will put this city in risk of encirclement, and eventually that does happen. So the two sides are able to encircle the city, and from there, Turkey is probably screwed, but they will, for now, move their operations over to Istanbul, while the purple and blue team forces that are not in Ankara will continue to take more of the country, with Iran eventually reaching over towards that Istanbul area. Egypt will continue to sweep through the south until eventually they have what they need, as Ankara will fall over here, making Turkey go into full-scale surrender, and leaving the borders of this red team looking something like this. So the three teams are successful in their jumping of the red team, aka the strongest alliance. Maybe, probably. I did say that, but I wasn't really sure if it's true. Turkey is the strongest country in the Middle East, so I kind of put two and two together, but, you know, there's a chance that the green team was stronger than them. I don't think Egypt or Iran's teams were stronger, but maybe there was a case for Saudi Arabia. I don't know, but the war is over. They did lose to the rest of the Middle East. We can go ahead and take a look at this peace treaty. And in this treaty here, we see that the red team is completely dismantled, which once again is a core rule of all peace treaties, but the three teams will go ahead and divide up that entire team, and there is a lot to unfold here. So first of all, both Syria and Iraq will expand. They not only get their old land back, but they also move up into the southern areas of Turkey. For the purple team, they'll go ahead and add Cyprus on their team, while making this entire area of Anatolia a member of their alliance as well. We see that the green team will turn their occupation into a brand new country, so this whole thing here is like Turkish green team, I guess. I don't know what it would be called. And then as for the blue team, they'll go ahead and flip Armenia and Georgia, so they will now both join up with Iran's team, while also making all of northern Turkey into an ally as well. A very interestingly shaped country here for sure, kind of like a Black Sea Chile that's horizontal, but still a valuable member for their alliance now. And the power balances in the Middle East now are very interesting. First of all, we have to remember that Egypt started by themselves, and they now expand all the way up into the Anatolia region, and, you know, they were definitely the underdog in this video, but so far, so good. The same thing can kind of be said for the blue team as well. They started off as only Iran, Turkmenistan, and Afghanistan, and while that is probably stronger than Egypt by itself, still not the strongest. They now add Azerbaijan. Actually, no, I take that back. They did get Azerbaijan. I forgot I put Azerbaijan on their team, so throw Azerbaijan into that, but they also added Armenia, Georgia, and then all of northern Turkey now. So as far as numbers goes, I'm not entirely sure who the strongest one here is. But that doesn't really matter, because the next thing that happens is yet another jumping. The purple team and the blue team both realize that, well, they're not going to fight a war against each other, because they only border each other up in Turkey, so what would the point be? That'd be very hard to navigate. And while the green team might offer to work together with the purple team to take on the blue team, that simply isn't enough for the purple team, because they'd get like no land from that. So behind the scenes, they've been working with the blue team during that Turkish conflict to really sort out what's going to happen next. And what happens next is, like I just said, another jumping. Both the purple team and the blue team will declare war on the green team. And remember, betrayal is a main course of action in this universe. Of course, the purple team and the green team, they've been working together for the entire video, but now it's not like that anymore. They're now being betrayed by their Egyptian brothers. The blue team, you know, they've been working alone, but now they have a friend in Egypt, until, of course, there's only two teams standing, which we'll see after this war. But with that being said, let's get to the war. You would have thought that maybe the Saudis would have learned a lesson from Turkey when they saw satellite images of the Egyptian and Iranian armies stationed right on the border of Turkey, but no, they didn't learn their lesson. So when the war is declared, this will lead to the obliteration of the green team's Turkish puppet state up here, as both blue and purple forces are swift in taking out this entire country, before then taking the wars to Iraq. Now the green team isn't completely stupid. They might have foresaw something like this happening, so when the war is declared, their battle plans will go into action, and they will immediately start an invasion into Palestine. Their forces will also move up into southern Syria, heading straight towards Damascus, while capturing the former capital city of Jordan. Now this was kind of a fumble on Egypt's part, because they did focus a lot of their forces in the north to take on Iraq. Remember, there is still a competition between the purple team and blue team. Whoever gets more land from this war might ultimately win the video. So the purple team is really focused focused on trying to cut off the blue team as much as possible, because the blue team does have an advantage in that they border the Persian Gulf and can invade the countries down here, while the purple team really can't do that. So there are a lot more purple forces in the north than there really should be, literally just for the sake of gaining more land, so they have a chance against Iran. This major blunder down here will definitely slow them down in the Saudi Arabian front, and it will allow the blue team more time to really get as much land as they can before the competition fully starts between the two sides. We now see Iran go ahead and capture all of Kuwait, while they also send some forces across the border over into Iraq in the less mountainous area, although once again there's an entire mountain range here that's very hard to cross. So Iran is kind of limited in the geographical front, but they will be fighting with their navy down in the Persian Gulf, while also utilizing the fact that Egypt is here to their advantage, as they are now heading straight in from behind towards the city of Baghdad, which they will eventually reach, and once again another large battle will take place. After this occurs, we see the complete collapse of the northern front for the green team as Iranian forces storm straight through Iraqi territory, while down south the green team does push back a little bit against the purple team forces, kind of alleviating Baghdad, but the battle is still raging on here as Egyptian forces hold on. Over here in the Palestine region though, things aren't going so well for Saudi Arabia anymore, as the full Egyptian military, not the one just up here but like their actual military, begins to push back against green team forces, eventually expelling them from their country and chasing them straight into Saudi Arabia as the front line now shifts towards that country. Eventually, one solid front line is made for the purple team here, spanning from this area down here in the Red Sea all the way up to central Turkey, and this is not a good sign for the green team at all. Eventually, we see blue team forces come down and also meet purple team forces in Baghdad, making the front line down here a two-front side for the Saudis to defend, which doesn't end well, and the purple team is able to take over half of the city. The other half, of course, goes over to Iran. Baghdad has now fallen, meaning that the Saudi Arabians are really on the retreat here back to their core territory. In a sense, they kind of leave Iraq to die, which is not very nice. Sorry, Iraq, you deserve better. Upon seeing that, though, Iraq will make the decision to go ahead and surrender over to both teams, and the war is on now in Saudi Arabia. Blue team forces will go ahead and start moving down the Saudi Arabian coast over here, heading straight towards their capital city, which is starts with an R. I think it's Riyadh, but I don't know how to pronounce it, so Saudi Arabian viewers, if you know, let me know down in the comments. But I keep saying Saudi Arabian forces because they really are the only competent military here. Now, I'm not going to discredit Oman or the UAE or Qatar or even Yemen for that matter, but in the grand scheme of things, against all these other countries, all of their teammates are pretty much stronger than these guys down in the Gulf states. So once again, sheer numbers are determining this conflict, and now we see Egypt pushing right down this coast over here, heading towards the holy cities. I think they already have Medina, but Mecca's right here, and then there's Jeddah. Interesting how this map doesn't have Medina on it. But I'm very curious on how that would go, because obviously those are two very holy cities in Islam. But if there's a war over here, then I would be very curious to see how the countries would navigate around those cities, because obviously I don't think any Islamic nation would fight in those cities. So I wonder if it would be like a radius around them and they just kind of leave it alone. And also, I don't know if there has been a war fought down here before. I mean, there probably has been. So any Muslims who know in the comments, let me know. I do like learning from you guys. I do a lot of it from just reading comments and, seeing what you guys say and, fact checking it, of course. But you guys do give me a lot of knowledge. So once again, let me know. On that same topic, let's go ahead and do the question of the day. So very similar to the last question of the day, but in the Middle Eastern region, if you can visit any country here, which country would you visit and why? I think that Syria is a very beautiful country. It did get destroyed in their civil war, though. I would have loved to go there before the civil war. For me, though, if I could visit any of these countries today, honestly, there's so many good ones. Like, Iran is a very beautiful country as well, but I don't think I can get in there. I might go to the UAE, see Dubai. That'd be cool. I think Iraq for the history would be very interesting, so I'm going to say Iraq. Once again, let me know which country you'd want to go to in the comments. Anyway, though, we now see Iranian forces right on the outskirts of Saudi Arabia's capital city, while Egyptian forces will continue their advance over here in the west. Sorry, my brain buffered there for a second. But at this point, it is pretty obvious that the green team isn't going to win this war. Now, once again, the numbers probably are pretty similar between all sides here, but I'm really basing this off the value of allies here. I'm going to go ahead and say that pretty confidently that the purple team and the blue team's allies are probably a lot stronger than Saudi Arabia's allies. So that is why we see the eventual victory of both of these sides here. But once again, I don't want to discredit Saudi Arabia, so they will be able to push back against Iranian forces over here, clearing up a lot of area around their capital city and forcing the blue team to think of a different plan. At the same time, though, they will be somewhat successful in pushing back the Egyptians, but they will eventually be stopped, which is not good, because the Egyptians will now enter into Yemen and take over their capital city before rounding out around here near the Red Sea and heading straight towards Oman down through Yemen. The Iranians, who have now rethought their plan, are going to make a landing over here off the Strait of Hormuz into the area which I'm trying to color, which is Oman and the UAE. They will fight fiercely against Emirate and Omani forces, but they will be victorious in taking over the UAE's capital city, and after a few more fights are fought, that country will surrender. Oman, on the other hand, is going to be putting up a lot more of a defensive effort here, and they will stop the Iranians from really getting into their capital city, while over here they do resume their front, now taking over the island of Bahrain, while down south the Egyptians will go ahead and force Yemen into surrender. So that being said, we are now down to only 3 countries remaining on the green team. That is Qatar, that is Saudi Arabia, and that is Oman. But I don't really necessarily think that the purple and blue teams would be able to finish these guys off, because this war has been very stretched out. You know, these guys are pretty far away from the active front line, so it's going to be hard to really supply this area down here, while the defensive capabilities of these countries might be enough to really hold off the advance because of those attritional factors. Still though, it is pro video, someone has to win, so eventually, after maybe a few months and maybe a little bit of rebuilding, we see the blue team break through those defenses and head straight towards Saudi Arabia's capital city, and also at the same time, straight towards Oman's capital city. Meanwhile, Egypt will cross the desert. Yep, they just do that. And they meet up with the blue team's forces over here in Saudi Arabia's capital. This entire northern area will fall over to the blue team's forces, while down south, Egypt will go ahead and do a large-scale invasion into the south of Oman. Eventually, the blue team will be able to take over Oman's capital city, forcing that country into a surrender. And after seeing all of their allies fall, and with the fall of their capital as well, Saudi Arabia will make the smart decision to also surrender over these forces, marking the end of this war. So the blue team and the purple team are successful in taking on the green team, but as they're sitting down for the peace treaty in Baghdad, the Iranians realize that, the representatives from the purple team never showed up. They're there by themselves. At around that moment, Baghdad was leveled by around 100 missiles. Yeah, the purple team isn't messing around. They're not waiting for a peace treaty or anything like that. They will instantly declare war on the blue team right as Saudi Arabia is finished off, meaning that the war will indeed be fought on between 2 attrition sides. But the blue team probably made a mistake in assuming that there was going to be a peaceful outcome from this. They both know that ultimately there has to be one team standing, and why would Egypt wait around for a peace treaty when you can get to jump on them? So Iran assumed diplomacy, and Egypt assumed war. Instantly, the purple team will get the jump on the blue team as their forces move up and capture the capital city of Turkey. They will also be successful in pushing the Iranians out of their claim of central Turkey, while taking over the capital of Saudi Arabia, and starting a campaign over here to cut up the Iranian front line, doing so right here, before then moving out and doing the same after capturing Saudi Arabia's capital. Up north, they'll be successful in cutting off Istanbul from the rest of their team, which might lead to them being starved out. I think there's a better term for that. I always say starved, but cut off resources, no supplies, just forced into attrition, I guess. I'm not really sure. But Istanbul will be cut off, and eventually they will be forced to surrender on their own accords. And from here, the purple team will begin to rapidly move across Turkey, and after doing this, they have consolidated pretty much all of the power in Turkey, which is what they really wanted to do, because now they essentially have Turkey fighting on their side, and, it's not good for Iran. Still, though, Iranian forces will be beat back over in Turkey, and now we see the geographical disadvantage that Iran has. While they might be impenetrable because of their mountain range over here, it does make it a lot harder to defend their claims over in Iraq. And the purple team is very aware of that, as they will now push Iranian forces all the way back, forcing a large number of them to retreat into southern Iraq, where there is a lot stronger of a defense. Of course, Iran isn't just going to sit around and let all this happen. They will be able to push back, and that's what they do down over here in the UAE, reconnecting up with the Qatar front, before also doing the same right up here and connecting up southern Iraq with the rest of their claims over in Arabia. Now, Iran is fighting a defensive war at this point in time. Like I just said, they're not able to cross the border over into Iraq, and any fighting up in the Caucasus will be met by the Turkish military, which will beat them very severely. And on that note, that is actually where the next bit of fighting begins, as Turkish forces, with the rest of their allies of course, cross over into Georgia and Armenia. They take over the capital of Armenia, before then capturing the capital of Georgia, forcing that country into surrender. And after Georgia surrenders, we see the surrender of Armenia unconditionally. And after that, Turkish troops will cross over into Azerbaijan, which is where a lot of casualties will be met, as Iran has a much easier avenue up to defend this area compared to, Iraq. Down south, though, the war is not in their favor, as the purple team has simply just the land and numbers advantage in this region. Once again, Iran is fighting a defensive front here, which is not good at all, because this land is, disconnected from them by the Persian Gulf. Eventually, the Persian Gulf will be met by the purple team, once again dividing up this area. They will go ahead and successfully capture Qatar, which is a huge victory for them in pushing the Iranians out of this area. And now the war is being fought over in the UAE, as purple team forces are very successful in making the Iran simply abandon this region back to Iran to defend the motherland. So, with that being said, the UAE and Oman's capital cities will be captured by the purple team. Meanwhile, they will still try to hold on over here in the blue team, with them pushing back over in Iraq. They'll move up into Kuwait and capture their capital city, before eventually working together to push the Iranians completely out of Iraq. And at this point, the blue team is now back to their core territory, where they have their 4 original members of their alliance. The purple team has control over most of the Middle East, meaning that they have pretty much all of the power they need to really wipe these guys off the map. And we first see that happening over in Azerbaijan as they move across and capture their capital city. Starts with a B, forgot what it is at this very moment, but I am now in kind of a hurry because we're leaving the house soon. And I gotta finish up this video. So purple team forces will now flood into Iran, heading straight towards Tehran, while once again kind of avoiding this harsh terrain over here. They'll be able to take over Tehran after very many months of fighting. And at this point, we see that the blue team is probably cooked. Turkmenistan and Afghanistan, very large populations, but probably not enough to really win this war at this point. We now see the purple team move down and start capturing all of the major cities in Iran. This will cause for defensive isolation over here in the mountains, but Iran probably moved most of their military personnel out of that area before these guys met the Persian Gulf, meaning that this area by default will eventually be taken by the purple team. And with that, they're able to expand their front line even further, now heading straight over towards the north of Iran and capturing this major city here, before then moving up and capturing the capital city of Turkmenistan and taking over much of the coastal land around the what's this called again? The Caspian Sea. We then also see them move across the southern Persian Gulf area, cutting Iran completely off from the coastline. Iran will then be forced to surrender. Followed by that is Turkmenistan, leaving only Afghanistan. And if Afghanistan knows what's good for them, they'll just go ahead and surrender. And just like that, the purple team has won the war here. We see that Egypt, the sleeper of this video, has picked up the victory. I don't know how they did that. I didn't plan for this, I promise. I did call them the underdog, but I didn't think that their team would win. Anyway, though, yeah, the purple team is victorious. Egypt wins. Congrats, Egypt. Now, of course, this video isn't meant to be taken as like a super realistic battle royale scenario. There are a lot of things that probably could have changed in a realistic scenario, so just know that there is a lot of different ways that this conflict could have been fought. Very similar to the Europe video. We could do different iterations of this if you guys really wanted to. But yeah, the purple team is victorious, and that is going to lead us to the end of this video. I don't remember if I did a peace treaty in the Europe video or not, but I do know that I don't have time because we are literally about to walk out the door, so I gotta go. With that being said, though, thank you all so much for watching this video. If you guys did enjoy it, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. As always, all the support is greatly appreciated. If you want to show even further support, make sure to check out our channel membership program, where you can get early access to each and every single one of our videos, as well as access to members exclusive content. But with all that being said, once again, thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next one. And of course, thank you to all